Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify the absolute microscopic chain reaction that literally keeps you alive, moving, and in perfect balance. We're going on a really fascinating journey to see how a simple everyday intention magically turns into actual physical mechanical force. And it all comes down to the incredible foundational principles of human physiology. Let's get into it.
So let's start by asking what I think is the ultimate physiological mystery, right? How do our invisible intentions actually translate into physical reality? I mean, think about it. When you decide to pick up a cup of coffee, or maybe tap your foot to a catchy song, or even just blink your eyes to clear your vision, you're not consciously thinking about cellular voltages or protein filaments, right? But beneath the surface, there is this massive, highly coordinated biological symphony playing out in mere milliseconds just to make that one single action happen.
To answer this, we really have to look at the body through two completely distinct lenses. First up, we've got the teleological lens. Now this is the why. It's the big picture purpose, like why we breathe, why our blood circulates, or why we even move to survive in the first place. But then we have the mechanistic approach. This asks the how. Like how exactly do red blood cells transport oxygen? How do our cells, our ions, and our tiny microscopic proteins physically make movement happen? In this explainer, we're going to touch on both, but we are absolutely leaning heavily into the fascinating mechanics of that how.
Part 1. The big picture. Homeostasis and the body's fluids.
So our mechanistic journey here really starts with homeostasis. That's your body's relentless, never-ending quest to keep its internal environment completely stable, despite, the absolute chaos of the outside world. And the bedrock of that stability? It's water. Now check this out. An average 70-kilogram person is carrying around 42 liters of total body water just to maintain that homeostatic balance. I mean, that's enough liquid to fill dozens of soda bottles. That water makes up about 60% of your entire body weight, and it provides the absolute crucial medium where all these chemical handshakes we're going to talk about actually happen.
And here's what's wild. A whopping 67% of this fluid, which comes out to about 28 liters, is packed tightly inside your cells. We call this intracellular fluid. The remaining 33%, that's your extracellular fluid, which includes your blood plasma and the fluid just kind of floating in the spaces between your cells. But that tightly packed intracellular fluid, that is the critical stage for all biological activity. It's basically the microscopic arena where the magic happens.
Part 2. Setting the charge, the cell's hidden battery. Okay, so every single excitable cell in your body acts exactly like a microscopic battery, just waiting to be used. Before a muscle can twitch or a nerve can fire, the cell has to be primed. It has to store up potential energy. Our resting neuron maintains a strict negative charge of exactly negative 70 millivolts inside its membrane. This resting membrane potential means the inside of the cell is literally more negative than the fluid surrounding it on the outside. It's kind of like a tightly coiled spring, just packed with tension, waiting for a trigger to release it.
But wait, how does a living biological cell actually hold a charge like an electronic battery? Well, it does this through a constant, honestly exhausting cycle of active work. Think of it like constantly bailing water out of a leaky boat. First off, the cell uses a sodium-potassium pump. This burns energy to actively pump 3 sodium ions out of the cell for every 2 potassium ions it brings back in. Factoring in your whole body, a massive amount of the calories you burn every single day goes purely toward fueling these tiny little pumps just to maintain that charge. Second, the membrane has selective leak channels where potassium just passively leaks back out. And third, you've got these large, negatively charged anionic proteins physically trapped inside the cytoplasm. Put it all together, and these 3 mechanisms perfectly balance each other out to create that exact negative 70 millivolt baseline.
Part 3. The signal, firing the electrical spark.
To flip the switch on these cellular batteries, we rely on the body's ultimate master controller, the nervous system. The central nervous system, which is basically the massive computing power of the brain and spinal cord, receives information, processes our thoughts, and initiates a physical response. It then fires those outgoing signals right through the peripheral nervous system, traveling rapidly down motor neurons to actively command our muscles and glands.
And this network relies on unfathomably complex physical hardware. I mean, just look at this fluorescent microscopy. The human brain alone contains roughly 100 billion neurons. 100 billion! These specialized cells have a central cell body, they've got branching dendrites acting like little antennae to receive incoming signals, and then these long cable-like axons to transmit signals out. It is an astoundingly vast network of biological wires, all just waiting in the dark to fire an electrical spark.
So let's look at exactly what that spark actually is. In physiology, we call it an action potential. When a stimulus hits a specific threshold of -55 millivolts, boom, it's a point of no return. Voltage-gated channels suddenly fly open. Sodium just rushes into the cell, creating this all-or-none-electrical spike that rockets all the way up to +30 millivolts. This absolute explosion of positive charge is called depolarization. Now, instantly after that, potassium channels open, allowing potassium to rush out and repolarize the cell. It actually undershoots slightly into what we call hyperpolarization before finally resetting. And what's absolutely vital here is the absolute refractory period during this cycle. It's actually a lot like a flushing toilet. Once the action potential fires, the cellular machinery simply cannot fire again until the entire process is fully reset. This built-in pause is a total game changer, because it forces the electrical spark to travel in only one direction down the nerve, which prevents chaotic misfires.
Part 4. The handshake, crossing the neuromuscular gap.
Okay, this is a critical moment. That fast-moving electrical spark has reached the very end of the nerve track, and it needs to cross over to the muscle. But here's the catch. Nerve cells and muscle cells, they don't actually touch. There's a tiny, microscopic physical gap between them called the synaptic cleft. Think of the electrical signal like a speeding freight train that just hits the end of the tracks right at a river. It can't jump the water, right? Instead, it has to load its cargo onto boats to cross. So, when the action potential hits the nerve terminal, it forces calcium to rush in. This calcium acts as a trigger, forcing the nerve to dump a chemical messenger called acetylcholine, that's our cargo, straight into the gap. The acetylcholine floats across the cleft and binds to specific nicotinic receptors on the muscle side. This chemical handshake instantly opens ion channels on the muscle, generating a brand new electrical wave called an end-plate potential. The spark successfully crossed the chasm entirely by transforming from electricity to chemistry and back to electricity. Absolutely wild.
Part 5. The engine, the mechanics of movement.
So, the muscle is now electrically excited. But how does that electrical excitement actually translate into pure, undeniable mechanical force? Well, deep inside the skeletal muscle tissue, the electrical signal travels down structures called T-tubules, eventually reaching the fundamental physical unit of movement, the sarcomere. Bounded by these structural walls known as Z-lines, the sarcomere contains a cellular vault called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. When the electrical signal arrives, it hits specialized receptors that act like floodgates, just bursting open to release massive amounts of calcium directly into the muscle fibers. It's a highly dynamic, almost violent microscopic reaction.
And this initiates the sliding filament theory, the actual physical engine of movement. Think of it like a highly synchronized microscopic rowing team. The calcium that just flooded in binds to a sensory protein called troponin C. This binding causes a long, ribbon-like protein called tropomyosin to physically shift out of the way, which exposes active binding sites. Instantly, thick myosin protein heads, acting just like little oars, grab onto thin actin filaments. They pivot, creating a power stroke that forcefully shortens your muscle fiber, literally pulling those Z-lines closer together. Then, a molecule of ATP energy binds to the myosin head, detaching the oar and resetting the trap so it can grab, pull, and contract all over again. It's a microscopic, high-speed tug-of-war happening millions of times over just so you can lift a single finger.
But, not all movement is created equal. What we just looked at is skeletal muscle. It's fast, voluntary, has a striped or striated appearance under a microscope, and relies on troponin C as its calcium sensor. But contrast that with the smooth muscle lining your organs and blood vessels. Smooth muscle is involuntary, lacks those rigid striations, and completely lacks troponin. Instead, it uses a totally different sensor called calmodulin, which activates an enzyme to phosphorylate the myosin. This unique setup allows smooth muscle to maintain long, incredibly slow contractions with almost zero energy expenditure. In fact, right now, as you're sitting and listening to this, your smooth muscles are silently working in the background, regulating your blood pressure and digesting your food without you even trying. Pretty amazing, right?
Now, this delicate, highly coordinated engine relies on absolutely perfect timing, which unfortunately means it can be hijacked by outside chemical agents. Think of these agents kind of like hackers infiltrating a computer network. Take botulinum toxin, for example. It hacks the presynaptic terminal, essentially cutting the wire, by completely stopping the release of acetylcholine, which results in flaccid paralysis. On the flip side, a poison like curare jams the locks on the postsynaptic side, blocking the receptors entirely so the signal is just ignored. But hey, it's not all bad news. Medical drugs like neostigmine work as a system override in the synaptic cleft. They stop the natural breakdown of acetylcholine, effectively supercharging the signal by leaving way more of the chemical messenger hanging around in the gap.
We really see the vital importance of understanding these hijackers when we look at an autoimmune disorder called myasthenia gravis. In this pretty tragic condition, the body's own antibodies mistakenly attack and destroy those crucial nicotinic acetylcholine receptors at the muscle end plate. So the nerve fires, the acetylcholine is released into the gap, but there's almost nothing there to catch the message on the other side. The muscle weakens and the patient really struggles to move. But because mechanistic science knows exactly how this microscopic machinery works, we know exactly how to fix it. We can administer an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor like neostigmine. This allows acetylcholine to accumulate and remain in the cleft way longer. That drastically increases the chance it'll find those few remaining receptors, successfully boosting the signal and restoring the patient's movement. It's a real game changer.
So from the 42 liters of fluid balancing your internal environment to the coiled tension of a negative 70 millivolt cellular battery to the incredible microscopic tug-of-war of your protein filaments, every single action you take is a masterpiece of biological engineering. Knowing that this invisible chain reaction successfully fires perfectly every single time you blink an eye, take a breath, or simply sit up straight, it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? With millions of these electrical sparks and chemical handshakes happening every single second, what other microscopic miracles are keeping you in perfect balance right now?